structures, shared decision-making, and self-assessment. We have to know enough about those 5 domains to be able to develop growth plans based on what we know about those. So part of this becomes an action plan targeting the score. If I got 100, what does it tell me? If I look at my individual scores in the 5 areas, then maybe I'll prioritize my own growth plan in terms of what it means. What would you include in the growth plan? Obviously, it depends on resources, depends on knowledge, it depends on prior experience, it depends on the mission and vision of the organization in terms of where you want to go with that. But a growth plan is simply putting in words or a narrative what your needs assessment. These 5 domains gives you an individual and collective assessment of the organization. Secondly, some form of action research. This too doesn't have to be a formal research procedure, which seems to be indicated in the title. What we're talking about is more reflection that leads us toward some decision about the impact of some action. So it's an observation of action that you implement or initiate and determine through some measurable outcome whether or not there is a positive, a neutral, or a negative effect. You will suggest an intervention based on your knowledge that you built through reading research. For implementation, followed by a measure of impact, whatever that might be. You get to design that particular measure. I know when we take this to some groups, there's going to be a lot of resistance that I've got a hard enough job already without doing action research. And I urge again to look and get your people to look at this not as writing a document as much as it is about observing what's going on, behaviors and action around you. And then the third piece that we would suggest in this model is to have some empowerment efficacy training based on short-term understanding, changes of behaviors over an intermediate period of time, and ultimately a change in organizational culture based on your understanding of efficacy itself. So I really see a need for this within this value-added model because we all too often think of empowerment as a process of putting a structure together that allows us to vote and find a majority concept or majority perception of how things should operate or be done, as opposed to real empowerment being a person's attitude or disposition about their contribution or their potential contributions to the organization, what that organization might achieve if everyone began to buy into that attitude or disposition about being better at what you do. Getting better every day, even if it's a small, very small amount. And then understanding efficacy from a standpoint of what it means to set your limits or set your goals to a point that you get better with what you do. And we didn't say it in this title, but we're also talking about the collective nature of that particular building of one's self-efficacy. So we have 5 domains that we could measure and get a metric. We now have 3 ways of addressing the needs assessment identified in the measure of those 5 domains. Then we would suggest coming back and remeasuring the domains after some period of time. We don't know what the magical time on that would be. I think that's part of your leadership role in this and part of the understanding of the group. It might be right away in certain areas. If the efficacy training or empowerment training were done and you want to go back and measure that piece of it to see if there's some change, so you could actually separate those 5 domains and begin to work with each one of them separately, or you could work on what was indicated in that as a group and begin and develop benchmark times. You know, we had an average of 102 points on the 5 domains, if we're back to that same type of numbers. So our goal is to get, if we got that in August or September, our goal is by December, let's see if we can get an average group score of 110 or 115, if there's meaning within the numbers themselves. Or possibly set a benchmark for the individual that everyone's going to raise 5% or 5 points. Obviously that raises the collective score, but if each individual has a goal to work on. So I don't know, there's be some discussion about which would be the best way to address that. So that's the value-added piece within itself, and it's fairly simple as described, but it's complex or complicated from the standpoint of all the strategies or activities that could be introduced that address these particular areas. So I think that's where it comes into play in action planning, especially action planning for best practice, and I hope some of this helps you. I think we have to understand the real meaning of excellence. In this standard-driven era that we're living in and working in, we're certainly striving for excellence. And excellence is a word that's probably been overused in the last 20, 25 years. At least there's a word out there, there's a carrot dangling in front of us that goes beyond just a minimal performance. Excellence is when all members are expected to meet high performance standards. The leaders being used supply members with exemplars of high quality work that meet the performance standard. Members revise their work based on feedback until they meet or exceed the performance standard. That's not that person with a disposition that comes to work every day and does their job and then goes home and draws their paycheck. And may be very safe and may be very, usually very minimal in the growth of their students. This is setting a higher standard for all persons in the organization, and is setting a standard in which gives the leader an opportunity to show, or a responsibility to show them what some of those exemplars are in terms of meeting those high standards. That'd be the first thing to be asked of you. Well, if you want that out of me, what does it look like? I think they should have some input into that, at least some discussion into what those exemplars look like. If you're going into a situation that needs a high degree of transformation or a high degree of change, then exemplars may not be there. But as you move into this language, you'll begin to collect those that can be used. As we sent you the electronic evidences of what we consider to be proficient work in the area of licensure for school administration, that was an exemplar we didn't have when the program started. Some of yours could possibly be exemplars as you move forward in the program. Within an excellence, attitude, instruction, and assessment are aligned with high standards. So not only do we expect it to meet high standards, they are aligned with what we do on a daily basis, and what we judge on a daily basis are aligned with these high standards. So we've got to identify the standards, we've got to distinguish between mediocre and high standards, and then we have to align what we do on a daily basis and how we reflect on that or judge that on a daily basis in order to move towards this level of excellence that we want to develop and maintain. Sustainability is probably the toughest issue there. I do think the value-added model has some significance to sustainability. We can push ourselves for higher student scores. We might even push ourselves to higher teacher performance, and we will do that. But it's difficult to maintain that or sustain that. We're saying within this value-added model, if we continually look at those 3 types of experiences as they relate to the 5 domains, we can continually get better and sustain what we're doing along the way. Because the action research and the growth plans and understanding efficacy will always drive us to do better. In an excellence thinking, the curriculum is rigorous and non-repetitive, moves forward substantially as members progress through the transformation. I think the instruction and assessment gets easier to deal with as we collaborate and work and provide these models of best practices within that concept. Curriculum emphasizes deep understanding of important concepts, essential skills, and ability to apply what one has learned to real-world problems. And we talked about that in looking at the Common Core example of a math assessment compared to a previous type of EOG. And it is a real-world problem, and they're applying essential skills toward that. So we're aligning our whole assessment piece to this deep understanding. So that's going to help us with this concept of excellence from a standpoint that we're going to have things in place that support what we're trying to get done. Wide variety of challenging and engaging activities are clearly related concepts. We can't solve that math problem or produce a product that addresses that math problem in the new Common Core type assessment unless we have challenging and engaging activities for our students. Use a variety of methods to assess student performance: exhibition, project, performance, task, and maintain a collection of student work. So we got to have exemplars for our students in terms of what it looks like to have these high standard driven products. If you think back about that math piece with the Common Core, the final piece of it was to develop a pamphlet that I can say this right, a pamphlet that a company could use to help their clients or their people who purchase, in that case, energy, people who purchase energy, how they can protect or conserve that energy or begin to look at ways to cut down on energy costs. So we get into environmental issues, we get into efficiency and effectiveness. The point being, there needs, if they're going to be assessed on that, then those exhibitions and projects need to be a part of the daily work. Provide time to meet rigorous academic standards, flexible scheduling, just some options that you might use even within your building of your action plan in terms of the strategies that go in place, that you're going to put in place in order to begin to meet this concept of excellence. That we don't just move from place to place with groups of students in order to meet a time schedule. That time is set that really facilitates learning and the assessment of learning. Supports, they need to meet rigorous academic standards. Multiple opportunities to succeed and extra help is needed. So remediation is still part of an excellence concept. The adults have opportunities to plan, select, and engage professional development aligned, or, as we said, professional experiences aligned with nationally recognized standards. Work with their colleagues to deepen their knowledge and improve their practice. So we're in collaboration as it relates to excellence. So an organization or a school that's moving into a concept or theory of excellence and what it means, the collaboration has to be a part of that. It doesn't work in isolation. Second piece of this new idea of excellence in the organization that we work in is developmental responsiveness. We create a personalized environment that supports each student's intellectual, ethical, social, and physical development using learning communities and focus groups to determine levels of readiness. So we have to know, we have to understand developmental needs and developmental progress and define that and be able to respond to what is there. Each student has a different level of readiness they bring. As a leader, when you're working with these staff of teachers, each teacher brings to the table a different level of readiness to even accept this particular concept. And here's something that I think we could spend quite a bit of time on but won't, but I think it's an important piece in terms of this developmental responsiveness, is an understanding of where we are and an understanding of where our individuals are. We might even apply this particular table here to building of collective efficacy in terms of where our people are. We could apply it to an individual classroom in terms of where our students are. But let's talk about leadership and standpoint, so we'll talk about the staff themselves. You see this continuum here between far left would be an unwilling person, an individual, to the far right is a willing. So We're looking at everything right of center here being someone who is willing to look at a commitment to improve the organization. We're looking at those left of center being unwilling to address organization.